Mary continued to press her advantage, but when she got close enough to make a second attack on the Hatchetman, it was already standing. She moved in for a strike, but the longer reach of the axe struck first, severing the Stinger's left arm in a single fluid motion, then biting into the torso. Although the Stinger's kick damaged the wounded leg of the Hatchetman, it did not seem to have any effect on the mech's movement. Little Mary went down hard as the Hatchetman pulled the axe free of the torso. Main event, page 128, by James D. Long. Most of the time, that pattern you notice is just a coincidence. That bump in the night is your furnace kicking on, and that riddle spewing sphinx is just a weirdo. On the other hand, sometimes a battle mech is more than just the reinforced steel, armored plate, big guns, and the large stick it carries. In the case of the Hatchetman, what at face value might be a middling entry into a rather lengthy list of medium mechs took on meaning well beyond the numbers on the notepaper. The Hatchetman project was a brainchild of researchers at the New Avalon Institute of Science located on the House Davion capital world of New Avalon. After hundreds of years of destruction and technological degradation, the team sought to prove it was still possible for the Inner Sphere houses to create new battle mechs. With almost all currently produced mech designs dating back to the Star League, it was a lofty goal. Sure, the Merlin was a thing, but that was a periphery construction which many in the Inner Sphere considered a fluke. Across most production lines, there were processes and pieces of technology which were being made without any understanding of how they functioned. Think of it like using your grandmother's chocolate chip cookie recipe without any understanding of what baking soda or the butter will do within the chemistry of the cooking. You can make thousands of good cookies with that recipe, but if you tried to create an entirely new cookie recipe, you might run into some trouble. When looking for a company that could take on the challenge of creating a brand new battle mech, the Hatchetman team could do no better than Defiance Industries, which was based within the Lyran Commonwealth. Though not an ideal, relations between the Lyrans and the Federated Suns had improved by the early 3020s to allow for the agreement with Defiance to produce the Hatchetman on Hesperus II. Now, I do want to take a moment to recognize Dwane Loose's amazing work with the Hatchetman's art in the 3025 technical readout. Between the unique look of the machine, the little touches like the tech working on the open leg panel, and surprisingly the downplayed emphasis on the mech's hatchet, this line art is just incredible. It's definitely one of my favorites in the entire TRO. Well done, Mr. Loose. The goal of the Hatchetman was to create a sturdy 45-ton mech which would excel in urban and other close-quarters environments. Now, as we look at the specs, keep in perspective the technology of the early 3020s and temper your expectations accordingly. The Chariot Type 2 chassis was wrapped around a 7-ton GM180 Fusion engine which could propel the mech up to 64.8 km per hour or a 4.6 movement. Though that would be considered quite slow even at the time, the addition of the Luxor 2Q jump jets pushed the movement profile to 4.64 and significantly improved the battle mech's agility profile. The 6.5 tons of Duralex medium plate armor provided 104 points of protection. This was significantly less than the max possible for the battle mech, but opportunity cost spares no one, not even mechs carrying large hatchets. For comparison, the Vindicator 1R was protected by 9 tons of armor, and even the BJ-1 Blackjack, often considered a mech vulnerable to incoming fire, carried 8.5 tons. Beside the addition of the jump jets, the mass-saved skimping on armor and engine size was devoted to weaponry. Primarily, the Defiance Killer AC-10 autocannon placed into the mech's right torso and fed by 2 tons of ammunition in the center torso. Yep, you heard that right, that's 20 shots of AC-10 autocannon ammunition stored in the center torso. Piloting a Hatchetman was not for the faint of heart or for the meek. Taking up 14 tons of mass, the AC-10 was a big investment, which left only 5 tons of mass remaining, which were invested in a pair of medium lasers split between the arms and a 3-ton hatchet carried in the mech's right arm. It's a fun little quirk of the original 3025 TRO that the hatchet isn't represented on the mech's record sheet, and instead, it was given 3 additional heatsinks. The later revised version of the 3025 TRO fixed the oversight. A Hatchetman without a hatchet may as well have cereal without milk or a wedding cake without frogs on it. Heresy. For those who would benefit from a refresher, a hatchet has a -1 modifier to hit during the physical attack phase and does 1 damage per 5 tons of the attacker's weight. In this case of the Hatchetman, that's 9 points of damage. While some might make the assumption that attacks with Hatchet would default to the punch hit location table, the Hatchet actually uses the standard table. The user can declare the intent to use the punch or kick table, but that has to be done before the hit roll and add a +4 modifier to hit. Other limitations include not performing a punching attack with the same arm that turn and not firing any weapons located in that arm earlier as well. The target of the attack also has to either be in the forward-facing arc or in the side arc corresponding with the side of the mech holding the Hatchet. Clear as cake? Good. In what can only be described as an act of divine inspiration, the most unique feature of the Hatchetman isn't the Hatchet, but the full head ejection system, which allows a fleeing Mechwarrior to take the mech's entire head assembly with him out into the atmosphere, where the head armor could presumably offer some measure of protection from incoming fire. The ejection system carried enough fuel to direct the head for 30 seconds of semi-controlled flight. When near the ground, parachutes deployed to provide a softer landing. From there on out, the Mechwarrior could wait for pickup or plan their escape should the battle not be going in a direction conducive to staying put. Rose's blood ran cold. All Mechwarriors dreaded facing the Hatchetman's axe, preferring to take out the 45-ton brute before it could get close enough to use the Hatchet. That was not an option tonight. Main event, page 124 by James D. Long. The main issue with the entire system was that ejecting from atypical positions or laying down was a great way to end up splattered all over the ground in the tumbling wreckage of the cockpit assembly. Though I do have to point out that even a standard ejection system could face similar challenges. Was it Confucius who said that one should never eject from a battle mech while there's terrain overhead? I've forgotten who said it. The first production runs from the lines on Hesperus 2 shipped out to Lyran units, primarily intended to act in a defensive capacity in urban areas. The thin armor and slow movement were liabilities identified early, and great effort was put into making sure the Hatchetman wasn't caught out in the open where it could be cut down quickly. Additional production runs also went to the Federated Suns as part of the original production agreement. Reports from Davion units were positive, as many were already familiar with the Enforcer, a 50-ton design which also carried an AC-10. Promotional materials painted a picture of the Hatchetman stalking urban corridors and alleyways, lying in wait for enemies to close and blunder into an ambush where the mech could fire its large autocannon and bring the Hatchet down on cockpits. How often this actually occurred is open to speculation, but one has to admit it painted a vivid picture which has convinced more than a few battlefield commanders to get their orders into defiance promptly. During one fight on the planet Severin, the 26th Lyran Guards faced down a raid carried out by House Kurita's 4th Proserpina Hussars. Piloting his Hatchetman, a warrior named Colonel Kester participated in the delaying action while civilians were evacuated from the path of the Kuritan forces. When the dragons pressed their advantage, the Lyrans fell back into the industrial complex, which was the target of the raid. This made the Kuritans hesitate before advancing, which gave the colonel time enough to set up an ambush. Repeatedly, the Combine mechs stumbled into those ambushes and paid the price with significant damage caused by autocannon and physical attacks. One of Colonel Kester's peer mech warriors, Malguatha and Sulfrana, earned 3 confirmed kills in that same action before being forced to eject from her mech. A lieutenant named Halmar Senton became the first Hatchetman mech warrior to earn a confirmed kill during the raid when he used the mech's hatchet to crush the cockpit of a Combine officer's battle mech. The holovid recording of that kill made Senton a local hero among the Lyrans, who always craved good battle footage. With early successes under its belt, the Hatchetman was deemed both a strategic and propaganda success. Both the Lyrans and Davions could now boast of producing the first successful battle mech design for a major intersphere house since the fall of the Star League. Reports suggest that the Draconis Combine was very interested in obtaining examples of the Hatchetman for study and possible replication with their own design. Their efforts were hampered by the installation of some dead man switch tech added to the Hatchetman, which would trigger in the case of a mech's destruction, rendering it too damaged for repair. I find this claim a little dubious, as what mech warrior would want their mech rendered into unusable scrap in the case of an ejection? This guaranteed dispossession sounds like it could harm as much as it could help, depending upon how it was implemented and triggered. If it was optional, sure, but sometimes you don't have time before you're hitting that ejection button. The fluff states that it would trigger if the gyros or actuators were tilted too far, but that is pretty vague and kind of confusing for a mech which could be easily knocked down without being destroyed. That's something to ponder. Curtin grinned and focused his attention on the dropship and the mechs. 3 had appeared and now paused a couple hundred meters from the dropship. The Regent's powerful computer drank in information and threw up inset panels on his HUD for each enemy machine. All were inner sphere-built machines, and none were Omni-mechs. The leading mech, a 45-ton Hatchetman, intrigued him. He had never seen one of the barrel-chested mechs with his own eyes. He zoomed in on the mech's namesake Hatchet and chuckled, as if enemies are trees to be cut down. Mercenary's Honor, page 45, by Jason Schmetzer. Being such a new mech, variants before the Helm Memory Core technology dump are few and far between. Beyond field refits, the first official revamp of the mech was designated the HCT-5S, and it first saw deployment in 3049, just in time to be rendered into charred scrap by Clan Jade Falcon pulse lasers and ERPPCs. But let's not get off track. The Hatchetman's original Chariot Type 2 chassis was retained, but the GM Fusion engine was upgraded to an Eadeh Motors 180 XL Fusion engine. The movement profile wasn't improved, but the weight savings was invested elsewhere. Thankfully, the jump jets were not touched, but that 11th heatsink was yanked to buy another ton of mass. It wouldn't really be a Hatchetman without a big autocannon, so the AC-10 was upgraded to an LB-10X, which maintained the solid punch, but also provided some flexibility in ammunition types. It also helped it was 1 ton lighter and took up 1 fewer critical location. Unfortunately, ammunition for that LB-10X was just a single ton, which prevented the mech from carrying both cluster and solid shot ammunition, so choose carefully, I suppose. At least the ammunition was moved into the side torso and protected by case. It wouldn't save the mech from an ammunition explosion thanks to that XL engine, but at least the core of the mech and the Mechwarrior wouldn't end up obliterated in the case of a critical hit. The 2 original Defiance medium lasers were replaced by 3 Defiance P5M medium pulse lasers, which boosted the damage output and accuracy for those close-range conflict resolution scenarios. The hatchet was still there, of course, and another notable change for the mech was the addition of 2 additional tons of Duralex super medium ferrofibrous armor. 8.5 tons provided 152 points of protection, which made the 5S Hatchetman considerably tougher than the original, even with that XL engine. While not a perfect machine, the Hatchetman 5S could boast of being tougher and more dangerous in the close-range battles where it already excelled. Just make sure those 10 LB-10X shots count. Across the next few decades, the Hatchetman was increasingly spotted outside of the Federated Commonwealth Armed Forces. A few were even spotted among the Pleiades Lancers and the Taurian Concordat. It ended up being so popular that considerable resources were spent on creating their own production line for the mech. Moving into the 3050s, Defiance Industries negotiated a deal with Johnston Industries to set up a new production line on New Syrtis so that the AFFS could have their own locally sourced supply of Hatchetmen. In one of the more notable historical events involving the Hatchetman, the legendary Kai Allard Liao faced down the Falcon Guard on Twycross in late 3050. Without the Yenlo Wang on hand, Liao resorted to piloting a Hatchetman as he stomped into a canyon rigged with explosives. Because no clanner has seen an ambush they didn't immediately want to rush into, the Falcon Guard mechs walked right into what was known as the Great Gash. As the Inner Sphere infantry retreated, Liao stepped up to slow the advance and buy them time to escape the blast zone. Laser fire from the toads at the mouth of the gash burned through the air. Commonwealth soldiers clawed the ground and the mechs returned fire, scattering the Jade Falcons without doing much damage. While people panicked and broke past him, Kai started the Hatchetman running toward the gash. When the enemy infantry resumed their attack, his charging mech became an obvious, though elusive, target. Lethal Heritage, The Blood of Kerensky Trilogy, page 382, by Michael A. Stackpole. Liao plunged into the advanced clan unit, spraying autocannon and laser fire into elementals that were leading the charge. To his surprise, the clan armored infantry retreated to the relative safety of the 2 regiments of Falcon Guard battlemechs that were making their way further into the gash. With his Hatchetman having suffered severe damage and hilariously outnumbered, Kai Allard Liao deliberately set the Hatchetman's reactor to go critical, while simultaneously challenging the leader of the Jade Falcons, a Star Colonel Alder Malthus, to one-on-one combat. Triggering the Hatchetman's ejection system as Malthus's summoner closed in, Liao and his passenger, a very unhappy doctor, rocketed away from the blast zone in the Hatchetman's head. The summoner, along with Malthus and most of the rest of the comm guard, were buried under the cascading rock unleashed by explosives that lined the walls of the canyon. It was a moment that drastically changed the balance of power during the Twycross campaign and further secured Kai Allard Liao's place in the history of the Inner Sphere. No small thanks to the Hatchetman's full-head ejection system. In 3062, Johnston Industries took their shot at an upgraded version of the Hatchetman with the Model 5D. Similar to the 5S, it included an XL engine, but from here on out it was a new creature. They upgraded the heatsinks to 10 doubles and maintained that 464 movement, but with only 7 tons of standard armor plating. The weight savings from the engine was poured into an Ultra AC-10 autocannon in the right torso along with 2 tons of armor. The only other ranged weapon added was an ER medium laser. Both were aided by a targeting computer added to the left torso. The hatchet was there, thankfully, and the overall package promised a more accurate, potentially dangerous 10-10-5 damage punch along with a hatchet in those close-range encounters. Overall, the 5D feels a little bit like a glass cannon, but at least it has more armor than the original. If you're a fan of the Ultra AC-10, the 5D is a fair option. The Hatchetman loomed above him, its huge axe already falling. Rose managed to move just enough to take the blow on the Shadowhawk's heavily armored chest. He could feel the impact of the heavy blade, but the smoke was so thick it was becoming impossible to see the front view screen. Throwing caution to the wind, he ignored the pummeling hatchet and groped for the fire extinguisher. The heavy axe fell twice more before the flames were put out and the smoke had cleared enough to see. Rose immediately wondered why he'd bothered. Main event, page 127 by James D. Long. Perhaps as an alternative to the 5D, Johnston also produced the 6D in the same year, 3062, and it featured a rotary AC-5 in that right torso position, along with 3 ER medium lasers, the hatchet, and a Guardian ECM suite in the left torso, making this our first Operation Sneaky Sneak Hatchetman of the day. This was made possible through an XL engine and, this time, an endo-steel frame. The 9.5 tons of standard plate armor made the 6D a tough cookie. Between the 5D and the 6D, I think I would lean toward the 6D for that armor and the fun of using that rotary autocannon. Defiance Industries also continually sought to update the popular mech in 3064 with the debut of the Hatchetman 6S. Structurally, the only significant change was a swap over to a light fusion engine instead of going with the XL. This marginally improved the survivability of the battle mech should it receive catastrophic side torso damage. The 464 movement profile was retained and that 8.5 tons of ferrofibrous armor kept the mech in the fight. Don't worry, the armor wasn't load-bearing. The LB-10X autocannon made its return, though this time it was fed by 2 tons of case-protected ammunition, which is great for splitting those ammunition types. The hatchet was there in the right arm, of course, and finally 3 ER medium lasers were added to the mech for mid and short range damage. They were split between the 2 arms and the left torso. The last quality of life upgrade for the 6S was the use of 10 double heatsinks, which made running the mech quite cool, even if leaping the full jump jet distance. A full alpha strike while leaping 4 hexes put the mech at +1 into the red. Not too shabby. Now at this point in the timeline, it's the Frog's humble opinion that this is the peak Hatchetman. The 6S had the mobility, the armor, and the weaponry to make it the efficient hunter-killer in an urban environment that it always wanted to be. Of course, this isn't our last variant, so let's see if they could do even better as time marches on. Missiles and autocannon shells tore into Tara as she closed the gap. The Griffin 2C blasted the Osprey with its laser again, slicing into the mech's center torso. Bits of armor rained onto the green grass, hissing as they landed. Colonel Osborne never saw Tara coming as he attempted to fend off an attack by the Panther piloted by Tara's other lancemate, Corporal Wallace. She raised her mech's namesake hatchet over her head and drove it down hard right into the side of the cockpit of the Griffin 2C. It chopped deep, shattering the armored ferroglass and cutting through the armor there right into the gyro. She hadn't hit Osborne directly, but he was thrown hard against the canopy, and his Griffin 2C swayed and then fell with a dull thud. Duties and Obligations, BattleTech Legends, page 137, by Blaine Lee Pardoe. In 3065, the Hatchetman 5DD was released, and as we all know, if 1D is good, then double D is even better, right? This model ran on an upgraded XL engine and an additional jump jet, which pushed the movement profile to 585. Off to a good start already. It had a standard structure, 10 double heat sinks, and a full 10 tons of standard plate armor. Of course, Opportunity Cost strolled in holding a bat wrapped in barbed wire, so all these bells and whistles had to be paid for with a more muted weapons loadout. The hatchet was still there, but the autocannon was replaced with a rotary AC-2 along with 2 tons of ammunition in that right torso. The only other weapon was an ER medium laser in the left torso. Both weapons were aided by a targeting computer placed into the left torso. While it was possible to really get that RAC-2 up and going, the mech was still left with a modest yet more accurate damage profile. As much as I want to like the 5DD with that larger engine, I think the RAC-2 was not the way to go with 10 tons of the mech's mass. Eventually, the Draconis Combine was able to get their act together with their own cobbled-together variant of the Hatchetman, which had plagued them for over 50 years. In 3075, the Hatchetman 5K stomped off their production lines, featuring a significant change to the look and function of the battlemech. The iconic hatchet was replaced with a sword which weighed 2.5 tons and could do 6 damage at -2 to hit. Records show that many Combine mech warriors disliked the less than elegant look and functionality of the hatchet, and the sword was a much more noble alternative. The 5K maintained that 464 movement profile with an XL engine, standard structure, and 9 tons of standard plate armor. Surprisingly, there is no autocannon to be seen, and instead a medium-range missile launcher 30 rack was installed into the right torso along with 2 tons of case-protected ammunition. Now before you get out the pitchforks and torches, keep in mind that it's a possible 30 damage out to 15 hexes, with the caveat that it's +1 less accurate and using the missile hit table for damage. To partially make up for the inaccuracy of the missile launcher, 2 medium pulse lasers were added to the mech, split between the arms. This added another potential 12 damage to those short-range shots. An ER medium laser installed into the left torso added 5 more damage to the short and mid-range. All of that was networked with a C3 slave computer placed into the head critical location. Overall, the 5K is not a bad take on the Hatchetman, though it might need to be renamed the Swordsman to be more accurate. This variant's value might stand or fall on your opinion of the MRM-30 being worth the investment. On his left, Bell's Hatchetman fired its own heavy PPC. The harsh bolt of infinitesimal lightning connected her mech and the Scarabus, charging toward her for a moment. Then the instant ended, the Scarabus was stumbling, a massive cavity blasted into its right chest. The mech immediately slowed and turned away. Without its armor protection, the huge 300 extra light engine inside was exposed. Another shot there, and the fusion engine could be destroyed. 1 down, 11 to go, Ronan thought. The Price of Duty, page 60, by Jason Schmetzer. Moving on down the line to 3084, the Hatchetman 6M captured the hearts of many an Inner Sphere mech warrior with the inclusion of some hefty new firepower. Much like previous entries, the 6M carried the XL engine and the legendary hatchet. With 8.5 tons of ferrofibrous armor and 11 double heat sinks, the stage was set for a real prize with this variant. Nestled warmly in the right torso, a heavy PVC offered the tantalizing prospect of doing 15 points of concentrated damage out to 18 hexes. Backing it up at short range, 3 medium pulse lasers were split between the arms and the left torso. The last bit of tech added was a Beagle active probe, which could be quite handy if trying to corner some sneaky targets. Potential alpha strike damage with lasers in the heavy PPC was 33, which wasn't too shabby considering 15 of it would be in one location and the rest has a -2 to hit. Unfortunately, the 11 double heat sinks would be taxed heavily, and that attack would leave the Hatchetman at +5 into the red at a standstill. It's not horrific, but it would be a sometimes treat and not an every turn tactic. While I'm not a big fan of the heavy PPC, I know it has the fans out there, so to those folks, check out the Hatchetman 6M. As successful as the Hatchetman line had been up to the 3070s, the market demanded more and more from battlemechs as technology advanced. Defiance Industries sought to answer that call in 3084 with the production of the Hatchetman 7S. The light fusion engine made its return, but at an upgraded size. With an additional jump jet, the movement profile for the 7S was pushed to 585. This faster and more agile Hatchetman was protected by 8.5 tons of ferrofibrous armor and carried 10 double heatsinks. The new tech of the 7S was the Multi-Missile Launcher 9 nestled into the mech's right torso, along with 3 tons of case-protected ammunition. This offered some flexibility in loadouts as well as empowering the mech to hit at long range, which was not even a consideration before. At the mid and short ranges, 2 ER medium lasers backed up the MML-9, and the mech was protected by a Guardian ECM located in the left torso. For the Hatchetman 7S, heat isn't an issue. It's well armored, and the prospect of 9 SRMs doing their work is worrisome. The entire 7S project ended up being a collaboration of sorts between Defiance and Johnston Industries after Johnston's new Syrtis production line was taken offline. Their vision for the mech was more as a generalist than its previous role as a dedicated urban fighter. The MML-9 launcher and bigger light fusion engine really underlined that goal. Early production runs for the 7S Hatchetman went to the Royal Guards of the Lyran Commonwealth Armed Forces, and all available information suggests that it performed well. Always a popular battle mech, this improved variant was welcomed. When the 7S started to ship to House Davion units within the AFFS, the reports were also very positive. Knowing that they had a winner on their hands, Defiance Industries opened up bids for future production runs. Clients included the Republic of the Sphere and several different mercenary units which snapped up the mech to bolster their forces. In 3092, the 7D Hatchetman was first spotted, and just full disclosure, I hate everything about it. To quote the great philosopher Jonah Hill, it's like slapping God in the face. Let me explain. The Hatchetman 7D reverts back to a standard engine but maintains the size increase, keeping that 5.8 movement. Unfortunately, they also yanked the jump jets from the mech, hobbling it to a 5.80 movement profile. At this point, I'm surprised they even left the hatchet. There was no big autocannon or even a missile rack on the 7D to make up for the hit to agility. Just 4 ER medium lasers aided by a targeting computer in the right torso. Not even 9 tons of ferrofibrous armor could make me like this mech. It did include a compact gyro, which is neat, but there are a ton of open critical locations on this mech, so all it does is allow for the movement of a double heatsink into the center torso as a one-hit meat shield. The jump jets are such an integral part of this design, I'm shocked that anyone thought it was a good idea to take them out. The compact gyro is largely useless beyond possibly giving the Mechwarrior a little bit more time, but for what purpose? This is just a bad mech, and it should feel bad. Go sit in the punishment box, 7D, and think about what you've done. Taking a hop, skip, and leap down the timeline to 3114, our next Hatchetman variant is the 7R. This was a project undertaken by Johnston Industries and commissioned by the Republic of the Sphere, who wanted to boost the Hatchetman with several pieces of new technology. Taking inspiration from the RAF's conflict with the Capellans and their effective use of the new Mortis battlemech, the Hatchetman was identified as a candidate for some serious upgrades. The light engine was retained from previous variants, but it was given 12 double heatsinks and 8.5 tons of ferrofibrous armor in a new configuration which gave the mech a much different appearance. The 5.85 movement profile respected the mech's pedigree, unlike certain previous variants which definitely should still be in the punishment corner and not sneaking out. I see you, 7D, get back there. Designers also made the bold choice to move the mech's traditional hatchet to the left arm so that the right arm could be dedicated to the installation of 6 standard medium lasers, a medium X pulse laser, and an actuator enhancement system which would improve the aim for all of them. The left arm hatchet received a more streamlined look that mimicked the look of the Mortis's hatchet, and the arm itself also received an actuator enhancement system to make those hatchet strikes more accurate. While definitely a short-range hunter, the Hatchetman was eagerly welcomed for field testing among Stone's brigades of the RAF. The prospect of running its tried-and-true ambush tactics in an urban environment had more than a few mech warriors excited. Justin caressed the main trigger on his right-hand control stick. His Hatchetman's shoulder-mounted autocannon belched gray smoke and a tongue of fire, kicking its right shoulder back. Shells of depleted uranium sped across the open expanse of the loading yard to slam into the left side of the Jenner, rocking it sideways as they ripped through one of its stubby wing-like arms. Justin quickly sidestepped back around the corner, hoping to draw the enemy mech to him. He began a slow count to 10. A cool killer. Binding Force, page 76, by Lauren L. Coleman. Not wanting to be left too far behind by the AES train, Defiance Industries updated the Hatchetman again with their 8S variant in 3140. Sparing no expense, Defiance installed a Clan-Tech grade XL Fusion engine into the mech, taking advantage of the weight savings without putting 3 engine criticals into each side torso. With the 585 movement profile secured, the mech's frame was recast in inner sphere endosteel, and the mech was covered in 9 tons of standard armor plate. 10 double heat sinks were included to keep the mech running cold as a cucumber. The traditional hatchet was placed into the right arm along with an actuator enhancement system to provide additional accuracy when it counted. The LB-10X autocannon made its return to the right torso, fed by 2 tons of case-protected ammunition. Finally, 2 Clan-grade ER medium lasers were added to the mech, 1 in each arm, which gave the right arm laser a slightly improved accuracy as well. Overall, the 7R Hatchetman is a tight little package that does honor to the original loadout while being more capable in every way thanks to the use of newer technology. Our last official variant of the Hatchetman is the 5DT, and it was introduced in 3145. With the standard frame, the Inner Sphere XL engine, and 9.5 tons of standard plate armor, the core of the mech doesn't seem that much different from earlier ventures. However, the use of triple-strength myomer for the mech's musculature made it possible for the warmed-up mech to boost its movement profile from 464 to 584 if the mech warrior is savvy about heat management. The other major benefit from the triple-strength myomer was that if it was in its toasty warm state, it doubled the damage of the right arm hatchet to 18 points of damage. Now that is terrifying. As far as component weaponry goes, the 5DT has quite a few of them to aid in keeping the mech warm and cozy on those cold winter nights. The primary damage dealer was a snub-nosed PPC, aided by a PPC capacitor installed into the right torso. This possible 10 to 15 damage, depending upon the capacitor charge, could be quite painful on its own, but it's backed up by 4 ER medium lasers spread across the right arm, both side torsos, and the center torso. Additionally, 4 ER small lasers were also spread across the mech's frame. As far as it goes doing the combat math to nail that 9+ heat into the red, the 5DT has plenty of options. Oh, and before I forget it, the targeting computer in the left torso aided the aim for all of the lasers, and a Guardian ECM made targeting this walking toaster oven with a knife all the more difficult. While definitely not a mech for beginner mech warriors, the 5DT reflected a solid implementation of triple-strength myomer and the snub-nosed PPC capacitor combination. For those mech warriors who are bold, brave, or just foolhardy enough to give it a try, it could be a lot of fun. The metal tangle all around made gibberish of Malvina's magnetic anomaly detector. She didn't know the Hatchetman was there until it suddenly lunged from behind a 3-story cinderblock pumping station. Its huge, depleted uranium hatchet, the size of a house wall, swung toward her cockpit in a desperate all-or-nothing shot for that one target that might permit the 45-ton mech to take down her twice-as-heavy and more behemoth. Flight of the Falcon, page 145, by Victor Milan. Now before we mosey on down to the Mech Frog variant, there is one more stop we need to take on our Hatchetman tour through the BattleTech universe. This stop gives respect where it's due for Tara Campbell of the Northwind Highlanders. Sometimes described as glamorous, the beautiful and intelligent Campbell was considered a rising star on Northwind even before she learned how to pilot a battle mech. As a mech warrior, Campbell faced down multiple threats to the Republic of the Sphere, including Anastasia Kerensky and her Steel Wolves, before finally participating in the battle for Terra itself against Alaric's Wolf Empire and Malvina Hazen's Jade Falcons. Though not exclusively a user of the Hatchetman, the mech was Terra's go-to for much of her career as leader of the Northwind Highlanders. In August of 3134, Campbell joined an exclusive club of mech warriors who faced down Malvina Hazen and lived to tell the tale. Challenging Malvina's assault mech and her 45-ton Hatchetman, even Hazen had to give the Highlander credit for bravery in the face of incredible odds. Though Campbell was able to get close, the fight became a grapple as Malvina sought to rip the lighter mech to pieces. Only through the intervention of Tara Bishop and her pack hunter was Campbell's life saved. With an almost musical but nonetheless alarming sound, the armor housed over her left shoulder actuator began to buckle. Getting tight here, she told herself. She considered punching out, but wasn't sure the ejector would do anything more than blast her right into Malvina's battlemech. She realized that she was humming the Seventh's theme, Gary Owen, tunelessly through her clenched teeth. Blue light surrounded her. She raised her close-cropped head to see the Falcon mech's head haloed in blue radiance. "Is this a private dance?" Tara Bishop said over the comm, "or can I cut in?" Flight of the Falcon, page 279, by Victor Milan. After fighting tenaciously to defend Northwind from multiple threats, Tara was called to action and aid in the final defense of Tara against the clans in 3151. In the lands of her ancestors, Tara Campbell faced down Alaric Ward and his devoted wolves. Though ultimately she was able to best Ward in combat, temporarily piloting a battlemaster at the time against his savage wolf, the cards fell onto the table as once again, even when Clan Wolf loses, they really win. In exchange for not wiping out the Highlanders, Tara agreed to stand down her forces and become a bondsman of Clan Wolf. She paid for the freedom of her warriors with her own liberty. As it stands, the future of Tara Campbell is uncertain. She was, quote-unquote, gifted to the Terran Jade Falcons out of recognition of their shared ancestry with the legendary Blackwatch. But time will tell if Tara Jade Falcon will thrive in her new station. Maybe if we're lucky, we can get a cool Clan Tech upgraded Hatchetman out of the arrangement. Paying attention, Catalyst? Let's do this. Of course, we can't wrap things up without feeding my insatiable ego with a Mechfrog variant. For the totally unofficial and non-canon Hatchetman 1MF, we used the recent Defiance Industries mixed tech variant as inspiration. A Clan Tech XL engine pushes the movement profile up to 5.8, and an additional jump jet in the center torso boosts it to 5.85. A Clan Endosteel frame purchased a little bit more mass, and 8.5 tons were dedicated to Inner Sphere light ferrofibrous armor plating. To keep the mech relatively cool, 11 Inner Sphere double heat sinks were installed. Now, as far as weaponry goes, I did replace the hatchet with a gigantic foam bat. Okay, I'm kidding, no I didn't. The hatchet is still there, but it is aided by an actuator enhancement system to improve its aid when in those crucial close-range negotiations. Joining it in the right arm are a pair of ER small lasers that can also take advantage of the AES. In the left arm, a snub-nosed PPC presents an opportunity to bathe targets in blue fire. Finally, almost as an afterthought, the plasma rifle sits in the right torso along with 2 tons of ammunition. Overall, I think the Hatchetman 1MF would do well in the Ilclan era, where clan tech is more often being mixed into older designs. Don't yell at me, Defiance Industries did it first. The 1-2 punch of a snub-nosed PPC and plasma rifle could absolutely wreck someone's day, especially if you followed it up with a hatchet to the cockpit. Tara raised the axe at the end of the Hatchetman's right arm, the weapon that gave the mech its name and made it such a terrible opponent in hand-to-hand fights. She brought it down. She felt the impact of her own arm as it struck, and felt the armor housing of the blade split under her weapon. One of the blade's legs broke. She swung again. The great expended uranium-edged hatchet rose and fell, slicing through the layers of ferrofibrous armor into the interior of Ezekiel Crow's mech. Service for the Dead, page 190, by Martin Del Rio. So why do we love the Hatchetman? For the entirety of BattleTech's history, the Hatchetman has been a consistent quality producer and a frequently seen face in the classic line art. Though it has been overshadowed by mechs like the Atlas or Timberwolf, some of my favorite classic line art just so happens to have a Hatchetman either as the star of the show or lurking in the background. Almost all the variants across the timeline are useful and fun to play, except the 7D. That thing's awful. Thankfully, I'm not super bitter about it. From books like Main Event to even more recent fare like Falcon's Flight, the Hatchetman usually puts in a good show for the reader. I suspect it probably has something to do with the primitive mammalian desire to hit things with sticks. I'd have to ask an anthropologist to be sure. Do you have a Hatchetman story? It seems like many people do. If you want to share it, please do so in the video comments. I'd love to read it. Thank you as always for coming out today to play in the BattleTech universe. It's been a pleasure to dig through the Hatchetman fluff, and writing this script was a blast. If you haven't already, hitting that like or subscribe button will make sure that the YouTube algorithm is happy, and as a result, you'll be much more likely to see my nonsense in the future. Going the extra step and becoming a channel member or supporting on Ko-fi will go a long way to making sure I can keep this venture going. I really appreciate it and the opportunity to do my part to support the BattleTech community. With that, I'll say good day, please be positive, and go out and make the world a slightly better place today and tomorrow.